The next menu item we're going to set up on this PinPoint 3 envelope is our navigation menu. You have a maps option above that. You can click on it. That's an inactive menu, so there's nothing to program in there. But the next item that we would need to go to under wrench is menu item 6, and that's navigation. So under here we have our vehicle settings. If you have a 2-wheel or 4-wheel machine steering, you would have to enter that in here. Your boom type, if your boom is attached to the sprayer chassis, then that's going to be fixed. If it was a tow behind, it would be trailing link. Your hitch point and drawbar point are both going to be 0 since your boom is attached to the physical sprayer. Now, it is important to note under this machine steering, even if you have a 4-wheel steer machine but you only spray in the 2-wheel configuration, you would leave this to 2-wheel. You set this to the configuration that you spray in. The next menu item under navigation is implement. So it's asking what the boom ahead of rear axle measurement is. So typically for these settings, we're working with a guidance controller that's outputting a corrected GPS position. So that boom ahead of rear axle is typically going to be a setting that needs to be entered. I think it's typically around a -78 inches or the metric conversion of that. Now the trailing implement geometries here, we don't need to add those in, but we would need to physically measure that distance from the rear axle to the application point and enter that in here for accurate turn compensation. ISO look ahead, we're going to let the controller do all of the nozzle overlap on off control. So these ISO look aheads in here, we just want to ensure that the on and off look ahead time is set to 0. Cat mod overlap is not an active menu. We don't have anything to set up. In our GPS menu, so GPS ahead of rear axle, we're typically going to set that to 0 because your guidance controller is going to be correcting that GPS position. GPS right of center and GPS height from ground, typically all of these can be set to 0 because they're coming from a terrain compensated guidance controller. And then our GPS used is going to be off the ISO or the CAN GPS, so ISO 11783. You may see a NEMA 2000 or a J1939 option. Typically we select the ISO or the NEMA. Whichever GPS is the option that's being broadcast across your bus, you can select that GPS that's being used. The next thing that we have down here is compass. Because the PinPoint 3 is not doing the overlap, we actually leave this compass disabled. The overlap control comes from the virtual terminal that we're connected to, so the compass will be left to disabled and we don't have to worry about calibrating that compass. The last menu item is we have a gyro in the hub that helps us get more accurate turn compensation measurements. So we do want to make sure that that gyro is enabled, and this contour mode right here, if you select enabled, it's going to make the turn compensation more sensitive. So this is for typically like terraced farming where you're going to be doing a significant amount of turning and you want high precision on that turning. The most common setting that we leave that to is disabled. That way it's not responding to every movement of the gyro, and it's smoothing out that turn compensation a little bit. So for a more relaxed turn compensation, we'll leave that contour to disabled. For a more active turn compensation, we'll set that turn to enabled. So disabled is the default setting for that. So that's all we have to do in the navigation menu.